Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about how to integrate and cite quotations. First off, we're just going to talk about what it means to integrate quotations. Integrating quotes refers to using quotes from another source, like a novel, play, or poem, in your own writing. This is something that we do in essays. Our direct quotes act as evidence for our arguments. So if we're not able to use quotes correctly, then our argument actually falls apart, and that's something that we want to avoid. There's a couple of rules that you want to follow when integrating quotes, and the first one, super simple, just use quotation marks at the beginning and end of quotes from a text. Some people will think, wow, that's really basic, Heather, I already knew that, but we want this video to be accessible and I want to make sure that I cover everything. So here you can see in my example, as soon as my quote from Shakespeare starts, what light from yonder window breaks, it is the east and Juliet is the sun. I've got that quotation mark at the beginning and at the end. Our second rule is that quotations never stand alone. What I mean by this is we don't just copy and paste a quote into our essay and call it good. We have to do a little bit more than that. Specifically, we want to make sure that we have some of our own writing, either at the beginning or end of the quotation that we're bringing forward, and that should be in the same sentence as the quotation. The easiest way to make sure that you're not just dropping your quote in there and leaving it hanging is to either state who's speaking or add some context on your quote. So, what's going on with this quote? When is it happening in the play or the novel? Why is it significant? That kind of thing. With our revised quote, we have offered a little bit of our own writing. So Romeo and Juliet are star-crossed lovers. Now I have my own little bit here. When he arrives at Juliet's window, Romeo states, quote, "What light from yonder window breaks? It is the east and Juliet is the sun," end quote. So don't leave those quotes hanging. Our third rule is to make it smooth. So even if we are offering some of our own writing before or after that quotation, sometimes it can still feel disjointed, and we want to avoid that. Our first example reads, "Horatio and Marcellus are afraid, quote, which might deprive your sovereignty of reason and draw you into madness," end quote. Okay, this feels very disjointed. One of the reasons is that I actually don't know who the "your" is referring to in this sentence. Whose reason is going to be deprived? Who is going to be drawn into madness, right? So I want to make sure that that is established here. The other thing that's very connected to this as well is that we're going from third person, talking about Horatio and Marcellus, to actually second person, the "your" or "you." We also want to remedy that and keep our point of view consistent. Let's take a look at how our second example flows. Horatio and Marcellus are afraid the ghost will deprive Hamlet of his, quote, "sovereignty of reason and draw him into madness." Here, I've given context that is applicable to the quote. So we know that it's Horatio and Marcellus that are worried, and that they're referring to Hamlet in this quote. They're worried that the ghost is going to deprive Hamlet of his reason and draw him into madness. So make sure that you've offered a strong enough foundation so that anyone coming off the street could read that sentence that your quote is within and be like, okay, I got it. I get what's going on here. Rule 4, we're going to get into citing quotes. So citing your quotes is essentially a fancy way of saying you need to tell us where you got this quote from in the text. Depending on the text, you're going to be citing different things like line numbers, page numbers, act numbers, scene numbers, and all of this. Your citation is always going to be at the end of the sentence that you have your quote in, and that's going to be in brackets. We're going to break down a couple of common texts that you might run into here. So for plays, you want to put the act, scene, and line numbers in brackets at the end of your sentence. Here I have a quote from Hamlet, and I have noted it's from Act 3, Scene 1, line 56. For novels, we're going to put the page number in our citation at the end of the sentence. So here I've got a quote from The Lord of the Rings. It says there is some good in the world and it is worth fighting for, and I've noted that it is on page 711. We also might run into poems, and with poems we want to state the line numbers in our citation. Very few poems will actually have the line numbers labeled, so it's your job to go in there and mark those down. That's usually the first thing that I do when I'm tackling a poem or writing on a poem. Here I have an example from a poem called Hope is the Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson, and I've noted that it's from lines 6 to 7 of the poem. I also have one other quick note on poetry. We're always going to put a slash between the lines in poetry. That's because the form or the way that the poem is written on the page can really impact its meaning. It's very important in poetry, so that's why we're going to show where lines end and where they begin. Next, we have a little interesting rule. If you're only writing on one text, which is the case for most high school essays, in the first citation, you're going to put the author's last name, followed by a comma, and then you're going to put where the quote came from. I have in the slide the first time. For example, if I'm using The Great Gatsby in my essay, I would have Fitzgerald, the last name of the author, followed by the page number. For all other citations, I'm good to just put the page number. As I said before, your citation will always be at the end of the sentence. Even if your quotation is at the beginning of your sentence or in the middle, the citation always falls at the end. One other reminder is always place a period after your citation, not before, or whatever end punctuation you're using. So if it's a semicolon or an exclamation mark, for example, it's always going to go after the citation because we want to show with our punctuation that the citation is part of the same sentence as the quotation itself. This is a common mistake that I see a ton in tutoring sessions. If you found this helpful and you want some more guidance on how to use evidence in an essay or even just how to write an essay in general, I would encourage you to check out my essay writing handbook, which is on my website, heathersonlinetutoring.ca. If you use the promo code TAKE25, then you'll get 25% off. Remember, you've got this. I believe in you. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. I'm also encourage you to put down any questions in the comments as well. And good luck with integrating and citing those quotations.